Let's talk about the Bears. The Chicago Bears have gone shopping. This is a blockbuster Bear day for Chicago. They've signed 2 linebackers out of free agency and one of my favorite offensive linemen in free agency. Tremaine Edmunds is now the richest inside linebacker on a 4-year contract. I believe in NFL history, but at least in the NFL today, Tremaine Edmunds signed a big money deal. That deal is 4 years, $72 million, includes 50 guaranteed. It's the largest 4-year contract for an inside linebacker in the NFL. So Tremaine Edmunds, a player that's only 24 years old. That's insane. He is an NFL free agent. He is younger than me. He is 24 years old. He was drafted at 20 years old 4 years ago. He has played in the NFL for longer than some people's careers, and he is 24 years old. This is why he is getting this money. A lot of people will say Tremaine Edmunds, he's been good in the NFL. He has not been great yet, right? He's been inconsistent. He's shown flashes. Well, of course, he was 21 years old. He was 22 years old. He was 23 years old. So he's going to grow. And Tremaine Edmunds is a guy that I really feel like only people that watch the Bills on a regular basis know how good and capable he is, because Tremaine Edmunds is one of those players that he is so athletically gifted that Sean McDermott, Leslie Frazier, and company would ask him to do things that are simply irresponsible. Like, Edmunds, you're responsible to shoot this gap in the run game, but at the same time, you're the same guy that drops deep into our cover 2, and you're the same guy that's got to be able to cover the entire middle of the field with your long wingspan, and at the same time, you got to cover the tight end, and at the same time, we want to cover the running back. So, yes, Matt Milano is the guy that I think irreplaceable for Buffalo and has been phenomenal, but that's been a combination. Tremaine Edmunds is just a freak show. And because he's a freak show, he's asked to do probably more than responsible. You know, it's a little bit irresponsible on the part of the Buffalo Bills, but they're going to miss him because there's not that many athletes that can actually accomplish what he can do on a football field, whether it's blow up a run because of his size, or it's drop back into coverage because of his speed, or it's tip down a pass because of his length, right? And for Bears fans, you know, I'm not trying to say Tremaine Edmunds is Brian Urlacher, but when you look at the physical profile of Brian Urlacher and Tremaine Edmunds, they're very similar players. I mean, Brian Urlacher was special because he was 6'3" or 4. He ran like a maniac, and he was great in coverage. He was a safety that converted to linebacker that was also big enough to play the run. That's kind of Tremaine Edmunds in a way. And this is a defense in the Bears that are taking that Colts defense, right? The last year or so. Because they've got Matt Eberflus, and the Colts with Darius Leonard, right? They need linebackers to be able to flow sideline to sideline, to be able to play in coverage, to be able to play the run. Those linebackers are essential to their defensive scheme. So understanding that Edmunds getting this money does make sense. Now, at the same time, I want to see what their plan is at the defensive line, because some people may say that it's the icing before the cake, because I think the reason Leonard and Okarike, or however you say the guy's name, I love him, but I never know his name. The reason they're so successful is because that defensive line in Indy had DeForest Buckner, right? And had those big boys up front that could allow those guys to move and flow to the football. So the Bears are going to have to make sure that defensive line is on point, but they figured that this linebacker, as we've seen today, this linebacker class has gone like hotcakes. And I thought that would be the case. If you guys remember and recall my free agency preview, I was talking in depth about how much I loved the linebacker class in free agency. I thought it was by far the best and the deepest class I have seen in years. And in comparison, the cornerback class, the wide receiver class, some of the free agency groups this year were not nearly as good as years past, and not nearly as strong or deep as the linebacker group. We've seen just about every linebacker group or great player, like top 10 linebacker in free agency, all be signed today in the first day of free agency. I don't think that's a coincidence because they're all really good football players and because teams are lacking good linebackers. It's hard to find good linebackers in today's league because linebacker is an incredibly hard position to play. It's incredibly hard to be able to cover all this play action madness. It's incredibly hard to stop the run. Linebacker today is harder than any position than linebacker's ever been because there's so much like eye candy. You know, when you play Kyle Shanahan, he's got 13 people running back and forth. He's got the guy faking the handoff. He's got the play action boot. You've got the stretch run. You've got 14 plays off that. So linebackers have to deal with all that stuff in today's league. So that's why, to me, linebacker is so hard to find. TJ Edwards is the other linebacker that they signed. And he is a good football player. He's not nearly as good as Tremaine Edmunds. He does not have the upside of Tremaine Edmunds, who I do believe has the upside to become a top 3, top 1 linebacker in the league. He may never get there. Don't get me wrong. He may just be what he is forever. He might be, but he's only 24, so he can still get better. I expect him to around 26 to 28 years old on this contract. TJ Edwards is a good player, and TJ Edwards is going to be that complement, right? TJ Edwards is smart. TJ Edwards doesn't really have any flaws. TJ Edwards is pretty good against the run, but probably a better like mover coverage player than I would say he is against the run. And also still fairly young as well. You know, let's just take a look at TJ Edwards because I don't know his age off the top of my head, but I want to say he's 26. Yeah, he's 26. So TJ Edwards has played 4 years in the league. 159 tackles last year, which is crazy. 130 the year before. He's not a big blitzer, but that's not really what they ask these linebackers to do in this defense. Edmunds would be that guy, right? I think Edmunds is the Leonard of this defense, if you understand what I'm saying. Edwards had one of his best coverage grades of his career this year, 82 passer rating allowed, which is strong for a linebacker. 7.5 yards per completion, which is pretty solid. And overall, when you look at his PFF grades, I know he's been very, very consistent in that regard as well. So he was ranked 10th in the NFL for PFF grade. And in 2021, he also had a very solid grade. In 2019, his rookie season, he had an elite grade, but he did not play as much. So he's been good in every year, and he's been consistent in Philadelphia. And as more of like the number 2 guy, I feel like he might even thrive even more because there'll be less pressure on him to do some of the things that maybe Philadelphia asked him to do. So I love the combo there. I do just worry a little bit about, are you putting the icing before the cake? And I do question the process of, well, you had Roquan Smith, who's arguably the best linebacker in football. If he's not the best, he's second best. So you had Roquan Smith already. Why did you get rid of him for a second round pick and not just pay him? But understanding that, it wasn't much more to get both Edwards and Edmunds compared to just Roquan. But I will say that Roquan, as he currently is constituted right now, is, a game-changing linebacker, and there's very few out there in the league. Roquan changes the defense. As we saw what he did in Chicago going to Baltimore, he changed the defense, like, overnight. So it's interesting, but I think it's good signings there. And then on top of that, you get Nate Davis, Bears fans. Nate Davis is a stud. I love Nate Davis. He was probably my favorite guard on the market given the age of him. I think he's 25 years old. So Nate Davis is a 3-year deal. 3 years, $30 million, 19.25 guaranteed. So 2/3 guaranteed. And I think it's a great signing. Nate Davis is a guy that's going to be excellent in this system. This is going to be a run-heavy offense with Justin Fields. You need guys that can move in space and be physical and run you over. And Nate Davis does exactly that. Like, this guy is tough. He comes from Tennessee. So, basically just exchange Derrick Henry running behind him to a quarterback. That's basically what Nate Davis is going to be doing for you. And he's in his prime. And I think it's a very manageable contract. When I see the guard contracts of Davis, Powers, and guys like that, and then I see the contracts of the tackles, I truly question why people would rather sign a tackle than a guard. Because I think guards are super undervalued in terms of the money that they get. Because I think guards in pass protection and even run blocking, like run blocking even more so, but pass protection, I think they're undervalued. Because, whenever you talk to like Tom Brady or Peyton Manning, they would always say like the interior is so important for protection. Now, Justin Fields might be a little bit different because he's like a mobility guy, but you want that interior to be secure so that you can step up into the pocket and throw, right? So I just feel like guards on the market are undervalued in general, and Nate Davis is one of those guys. I really like his style of play, and I think he's a perfect fit with his ability to move and also his toughness for what Ryan Poles is looking for in the offensive line. Of course, Ryan Poles is a former offensive lineman, so that should be his position of strength when it comes to acquiring players. And I think he hit one right here. The Chicago Bears are back at it. Just as we talk about, they need defensive line. The icing before the cake. Well, here comes the cake, baby. I know Bears fans love their cake in more than one way. DeMarcus Walker is a Chicago Bear. DeMarcus Walker was an absolute monster for Mike Vrabel's defensive front in Tennessee last year. DeMarcus Walker had 7 sacks, according to Pro Football Reference, but 8 according to Pro Football Focus, depending on your preference. 16 quarterback hits on the year, which was a drastic jump from 7 the year before, which was also career high the year before. He's played in Denver, he's played in Houston, Tennessee, and now the Bears. The Bears are back, baby, in a big way. 7 sacks. And his pass rushing productivity really stands out statistically. He's a big dude, and the player you're getting is a guy that could play inside or outside. So he's a guy that on early downs you could see playing on the edge, and on third down or on passing downs, he'll play in the interior. So on a 4-man front, that's what you're going to see from DeMarcus Walker. And in Tennessee, he played mostly on the edge, as like a big edge, as you would call it, a jumbo edge, so to speak. Okay, so DeMarcus Walker had 32 pressures last year, and he had 7.9 PRP, pass rushing productivity, last year. 7.9 would rank 30th among all edge rushers. It was just below Arden Key, my boy, John Franklin Myers, also my boy, and Nwosu, Tessa's boy. So, pretty good numbers from DeMarcus Walker. The only thing I question is, it is a much different scheme going from Tennessee, where he was a breakout player, to Chicago. So, as long as Matt Eberflus uses him in similar ways, I'm sure he'll be good. But I like the player, and he was also a pretty quality backup in Denver, even before Tennessee, before the breakout. The Texans year is kind of a outlier for him. That was a bad year for him. But the years before that, I felt like he was a good rotation player for Denver, and then kind of had that down year for Houston and bounced back in a big way for Tennessee. So he's in Chicago now. So that's Chicago, guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning in so far. If you haven't already, make sure you Gronk spike the like button. That allows more people to see this video, more people to see the BLV. We can grow a bigger community of football fanatics just as we have right now in the chat.